I say to my students, don't be polite. That, you know, be polite off stage, but don't be polite on stage. Because if you're being polite on stage, you go to when I go to the theater and my head, which is exploding with stuff, and all kinds of tempests and all kinds of stuff. And on stage, it's much more controlled than in my head. I think, well, what the heck am I here for?
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really excited because this is actually a guest that I've known for at least, well, since 2019, because of all the Whitman Bicentennial events. And as you are going to learn, she's quite the theatrical personality, all things Whitman in performance, but there's so much more about her artistry that I don't know. So that's why I'm so excited to feature her here today. I am joined with Karin Coonrod, which I always laugh because when I say your name, it has this Irish brogue. But Karin Coonrod is a director whose work has been seen and heard across the country and around the world. The New York Times actually calls her prodigiously inventive. I love that. And galvanic. Her work is galvanic. Born in Chicago, she has early memories of Italy that she was actually talking to me about before I hit this record button. Studied English at Gordon College in Massachusetts, studied theater directing at Columbia University, and now she's actually faculty at the Yale School of Drama. And we're going to touch upon a lot of her bio organically through just this entryway. So, well, first, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Andrew.
So, I think my first question is definitely about your studies, because I think it's very interesting how you go from English to then theater directing as a study at Columbia. And I can see there's a similarity there, but what was that process? Like, what are the years between these studies? How did that all come to be?
Great. Do you want me to hold that?
Sure. No,
Okay.
whatever.
So, I studied medieval literature too. I was in Durham, England for a while, and for a couple of years actually, and was studying Beowulf's Old English as well as Middle English, and Chaucer, and that I had a marvelous teacher at Gordon who was a mentor to a small group of us, and we really loved the muscularity of the language, and the joy of the humanity of these texts, um, and the medieval mystery plays and all of that. So uh, I then taught in a boys' school for a while, for a few years. So I was an English major, then I taught in a boys' school, and I started to do the plays. I remember when it was a Catholic boys' school, and the principal who auditioned me, hired, interviewed me, said, "Would you like to do the theater?" And I said, "Yes," without skipping a beat. And I thought, "What? What? How did I know I could do that?" I don't know, but it was, and that goes back to just having had a hunger for all of that, not ever articulating it in the theater. I mean, as a child, I did so many things. I played the piano, I sang, I danced, I did a lot of painting, drawing. I was kind of known for doing that, for drawing and painting, and was thinking of fashion. I also played the piano and the flute, and entered competitions, and my dad wanted me to go into music. Um, I loved all of it, and then I also loved writing. I was a journalist and wrote for the Indianapolis Star because we lived in Indianapolis then. Um, and I was going to a girls' school, Catholic girls' school. So I I did some little, yeah, I was student council president. I did a lot of activities and so forth. But it wasn't until that moment when, and in college too, I did a few things that radio play and different things. But um, and performed a little bit, not much, a little bit. And then when I was asked to do this by the principal, I said yes. And I started doing musicals. So the first musical was Shenandoah. The second one was My Fair Lady. And you say, you know, at a boys' school, but the girls came flocking to audition for it. And it was, and we had a Henry Higgins, you know, a beautiful guy, young student who was just marvelous in the role. And uh in in that way, I never wanted the students, and so I this is something that goes to the heart of who I am as an artist. I never wanted the students to watch a videotape of what had happened on Broadway and to try to um, duplicate that. That we never, you know, some of them had seen it, sometimes I had seen it, but I wanted to make everything from scratch. So actually, my apprenticeship is in musicals. I did quite a few, South Pacific, at the school, Man of La Mancha. Then, you know, I was hired to do across the street in a park, summer and musicals. So Oliver and Godspell. Oh goodness, did Guys and Dolls. That's a great one. Yeah, and so anyway, and always we would make everything, you know, so it was never um it was made from scratch, and that was really, really important to me. I don't even understand the notion of taking on something that was duplicate, you know, just a duplicate of something else. And getting the students around that imaginative um journey, you know. So so when I was at the school, and I was there for about 5 years, 5 years at the boys' school. I also brought them, the boys, once a month to New York because it was a school in New Jersey, Christian Brothers Academy. And I brought the boys to New York. It was about once a month, and sometimes with, you know, a group of 50, sometimes a group of 25, very, you know, a small group. Sometimes big, sometimes, you know, medium size. And we would see all kinds of things. You know, we would see stuff at Classic Stage Company, where since I've actually directed something, and we would see stuff on Broadway. We'd see all kinds of Martha Graham dance, um, all kinds of stuff. I brought the boys, and I would kind of um, w- I would sort of trick some of the people on the some of the boys on the basketball team to come so that it would be cool, so that everybody would then want to come, and so no one would. Anyway, it was really it there was a I was trying so much to get this inside their imaginations, the importance of the theatrical imagination. So I started while at the boys' school in my last couple of years there. I said, you know, I mean, I was teaching English, um, and I love, you know, I love the written word and reading, and I love that very much, and the discussion around books, poetry, and all of that. But what really had my heart was making the theater, and so I decided that I needed to, and I went to. This is where the change happened. I took the boys to Greece, and I was in Epidaurus, is how you say it in Greece, or Epidaurus, and um, my mom went on that trip. It was very special, and there were about 50 boys. It was a huge trip, and some of the teachers were there, and because I could never have handled them all by myself. And I remember sitting probably in the middle of the amphitheater and looking out over the stunning landscape and hearing this is, everyone knows about this, but a pen is dropped or even a pin, and you can hear it. And I thought, this is so moving that they sculpted an arena in order to hear the theater, in order to hear the words. And I was so moved by the humility and the success of that effort. And I had been to Vita, which was playing at that time in the 80s. This was 84 or something like that. And I remember that the sound system broke down. I went to see Evita 3 times because I thought it was just brilliant. I loved it. And I loved the movement. I loved Mandy Patinkin, who had since then I've worked with him once. It was really fun, but he was so extraordinary. And their movement across the stage was almost like an Asterix comic book move. And uh I, I but the sound system broke down twice in the 3 times that I went. And I thought, this is really interesting. In our advanced technology here on Broadway, the sound system breaks down and we can't move forward to listen to this play. But in Greece, everything was heard. And, so I was very moved by the humility of that gesture, by the importance of that for those people. Um, that all of that was seen and heard. Of course, the scene, that's another thing, because what you saw close up and what you would see from a great distance would be different things, but you could hear. And so, and also when people in the early 20th century, up until that point, people would always say, I'm going to go and hear a play. Do you want to come with me? But now we always talk about seeing a play. We want to see a play. And so the image has sort of eclipsed in a way the hearing of it. And so the hearing of the word, the hearing of things.
LGBT stories are universal, but each one speaks to the individual heart and soul of the writer telling it. Do you have a story to tell? If so, the Gay and Lesbian Review wants to hear from you. Have you been moved by an LGBT book, film, painting, television show, or other form of media? The GNLR believes in bringing awareness to queer art and artists through reviews, commentary, and thought pieces in which the author relates their personal lives to a particular piece of art, a novel, a movie, or what have you. In addition to the articles published in the print magazine, the GNLR also publishes articles on its blog as well as personal essays on its popular Here's My Story section. This allows people like you to share their own experiences with our readers. To learn more about submitting either to the print or the online edition of the GNLR, visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org, and scroll down to the bottom of the page to find a link to their writer's guidelines. If you have any questions, email stephen.hemrick@glreview.org. The GNLR can't wait to see what you have to say. And remember that they're offering an exclusive code with the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So when you subscribe to the magazine, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. So that's 7 issues instead of 6. Again, just visit theglreview.org and click subscribe and enter the promo code ITBR for your free issue.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
And anyway, it was in that moment. And I was also reading, oh God, what's his name? Well, I can't remember his name. Anyway, incredible guy that wrote about the Colossus. oh, I'm forgetting his name, which is Henry Miller. I was reading Henry Miller, and you know, wildly, I was going through a Henry Miller stage, and he wrote about Epidaurus, and it was really so exciting also to kind of see what he was writing. But it was in that space that I said I have to go into the theater. So so I knew, and that was in '84, I think. So the whole next year, I was sort of thinking it through. I was still a year at the boys' school. I started that last play at the boys' school, um, and there was a little resistance to it initially. Instead of being, they didn't have a theater, and during my time there, they built a theater. So, but I never, I left before um, they were a little chagrined about that. But I just, I had to leave, you know. But they built a 350-seat theater. But we used to do all the plays in the auditorium, the gym, where the boys played basketball. And the last play that I did there was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and we started it in the middle of the gym floor where the two tall boys, you know, in basketball, they jump for the ball. I don't know what they do, but anyway,
Yeah, they have to fight over which side gets the ball.
who gets the ball? So because I would go and see them, and I saw that, and all I could think when I saw the basketball game was, oh, this is where we're going to do the theater. This is where we're going to start it. And so I had a beautiful young woman from a you know, school in that area who started the show as the narrator, and right in that spot with a spotlight and in the middle of the gym floor, and we built stadium seating around it, and it was so exciting because it was just in the round, and we had very I asked the art teacher, who was sort of the head of the scenic division, to just create an amazing camel. and and we did, you know, and I brought the boys down to Canal Street jeans, and we got um sweatshirts with their Levi, you know, Reuben, and all their names, the tribe of Hebrew tribe, and then Levi, you know, and then uh, we also got the other big team there was the hockey team. So I took their sticks and turned them upside down, and they were the staves. So we just did wild stuff, and the the this I kind of involved the sports in the theater to sort of um uh not so that the boundaries were not clear, but the boundaries were fuzzy. The boundaries were, you know, we were moving into each other, and yet it was theater, and everyone could come around this, you know, very special piece. It was very special, I have to admit. I really I thought, wow, this could be anyway. It was at that time that I said, I'm going to go to New York, and this is what I must do. So I went to Columbia, and I did not want to go anyplace else because I wanted to be in New York City. I wanted that place to be where I would do my research, you know, and I didn't have much money. I just, you know, school did not cost that much then. It's in the '80s. It did not cost as much as it is now. I just don't even know how it's what's happened. How did this happen? You know, I don't know, but it was anyway, I remember just getting so many comp tickets and going to see like Pina Bausch. I was beside myself, you know, sitting in the front row of Seven Deadly Sins at BAM Opera House. And then I went to see Andre Serban, everything at La Mama. I'd already been going there, you know, and CSC and all kinds of places, but the Trojan trilogy, and, you know, and at that time, all kinds of, they were oh, what's all all kinds of stuff was going on. I was an intern at BAM in '87, and became friends with Joe Malillo, and you know, was an intern there during this incredible Next Wave Festival, which was Peter Brook and Pina Bausch and Teresa de Keersmacher. So I saw this dance, and it was so exciting to me. It was just like, oh, you know, I was just taken to new places. I really loved it. And, it's just like dance and theater mixed and words and music and all this, while, being taught by um, people that, we could engage with, and also having colleagues. But it was really about going to be in New York was very important to me, on the ground, boots on the ground, going to see everything I could. Um, and um, I started a company. I mean, I've ridiculous chutzpah. So, and my very importantly, in 1987, a man walked into the our classroom, and I just said, "Oh, who is this?" It was Liviu Chule, who became my mentor. And he came into our lives. And I went to New York in 1985. And then 1986, I believe, it was when he walked in the next year. And he was amazing. And he was like, he's no longer with us. He died in 2011. But I've seen him since. I'd seen him in Bucharest a few times. He's Romanian, an extraordinary story from a very wealthy background. His father built him a theater, the Bulandra Theater, and he he was an architect, he was an actor, he was a designer, he was a director, and he headed the Guthrie Theater for 4 years, and then came to teach at our school at Columbia for just a year. I think he was only there 1 year. Then he went to NYU because probably Zelda gave him a better deal. I don't know. I don't know how he, but I think Zelda Fitzlander decided, and he had worked at the arena. So, there's all this um, getting a really great imagination. But I was very lucky. And then he asked me to assist him. And I said, wow, because I didn't have a theater background. I mean, I only directed theater in this boys' school. And before then, I didn't study theater as an undergrad. I studied English and I was a writer and all that. So um, he said, "You have the poetry." I remember, "You have the poetry." And so I said, "Yes, I want to," and so he gave me an option of two things. And he said, but he gave me two choices. But then he says, "But take this, the Buckeye, um,
Oh,
Guthrie."
yeah. So, well, and just for everyone out there, that's such a classic ancient Greek play, right? So who wrote that for everyone out there?
Yeah, Euripides, right? It's Euripides. And yeah, it was great, actually. It was great. Um, uh, there were, and we were there for 9 weeks. I had started my company in that summer early on, right after school, started the company, then went to assist him for 9 weeks. And it was an extraordinary experience, actually, being with him, staying with him nonstop. And I was learning Romanian too. La di vedere, just little, and I had dinner with him and Helga every single night. So it was like I was a surrogate daughter or something. It was an extraordinary experience for me, and also being with him while he designed the lights, because he had a particular way, not an American way, of working with the lights. So I felt very at home with him, a European, and my mother, because I'm half Italian. Um, People don't know anything of that because of my name, but my mother was not an American, and my first memories are in Italy. So um, even though I was born in Chicago, so I felt at home with him. And he particularly he was Romanian, but he seemed to have a lot of Italian in that Romanian, Um, uh,
Well, and it's so interesting that it's that Dionysian play that really you learn so much from that tutelage with him, because there's this quote in your bio that has just fascinated me after preparing to talk with you, which is, if Dionysus is grinning, I know it's theater.
yeah.
But you have expressed so much atmospheric knowledge of just what fascinates me with the root of theater, which is even with Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, you're going back to antiquity or an ancient past in a way. So it makes sense that you're then thinking of the auditorium mixed with the gymnasium, like how much Greek culture relied on the arts and athleticism were tied together. They weren't separated in the way our now modern culture sees arts and culture separated from sports
Yeah,
culture.
absolutely. Blurring the boundaries is really critical. And I've that's a joy to me. I mean, not separating, not pinning down and identify. I mean, one has to be articulate and clear as possible, but it's really bringing everybody in and you know, yes, Dionysus, he's the god of the theater. So he shakes things up. And what our task is to shake up, the consciousness, to shake us ourselves and our audience and our creators, shake us up so that we can um, go to a new place together. And so yeah, that play was very important to me. A very dear friend played the role of Dionysus, who is in Funny Girl right now, Peter Francis James. And I haven't seen the play, but anyway, he's a very dear friend, and I remember the messengers coming in and talking about, what happened. And another very dear friend of mine, Trezana Beverly, played Agave. She's a friend, we just talked the other day on the phone together. Extraordinary. She won. In fact, some of the people in that play I've remained very close to, and Frazano's one of them. She played God in Orvieto when we did the medieval mystery plays, and she often says, um, the two things that I've loved doing the most were, when she played Lady in Red for Color Girls Who've Considered Suicide and got a Tony Award for that role, and when she did God in front of the steps of the Duomo of Orvieto, right in front of the extraordinary facade, and did actually a passage of From God's Trombones of James Weldon Johnson in English, and then the Italian chorus responding. So I really like finding a way that lots of disparate parts, and I have to be, it's like disparate sounds awfully close to desperate. It's like I say that and I think, yeah, yeah. Because it goes into that. But it's disparate parts and bringing all of that together into something that is a vision, for that takes us by surprise and won't let us go, you know, um, won't let us go and stays with us. I mean, I believe I believe that the theater is a holy business. I mean, I went into it for that reason, um, and I remain in it, and not discouraged, by the commercialism, because I believe it's a holy thing, a holy task.
Yeah. Well, and we go back to whenever I've taught drama, or even I taught the Broadway musical last year, just briefly mentioning Aristotle's Poetics and the way that when he thinks of theater, it's that whole idea of mimesis, which is just the act of interpretation of everyday life. That theater is really, I think, why we're so, as a culture, drawn to whether it's theater or whether it's the imagination of TV, film, characters. That characterization in narratives reflects our everyday lives, but in it's somehow turned on its head a little, or
Yeah,
you see aspects of yourselves where now you have enough distance, no matter whether it's opera or comedy, a tragedy, even reality TV, which we can associate qualities and characteristics about ourselves. And I see that in just the way you even talk about your process. I can tell that there's such a analysis behind every idea that you're expressing. And I think I would love for you to explain that tutelage, because it seems that that is the opening that mentorship you received at Columbia, that it's led you on this pathway where is that the advice you have for those out there, that you really, once you find that network, not to let it go, to really trust your instincts with a mentor?
Oh, absolutely. There's I have a whole notebook of everything that I was writing down, and there were times in the aesthetic of that, he was a little more old school and I was new school. I mean, new school is like somebody who said, who was it who said it? Somebody just said this to me the other day. One of our jazz musicians said, "There's no old, no, Marsalis, Wynton Marsalis, I think, or somebody like this said, there's no old school and new school. There's just school." So I can't remember, so many things float around in my head, but I was writing stuff, everything that he said to me, and I had a whole notebook of it. And, one thing that he said, I remember, there's to not let, and this was never a problem for me, but I love that he articulated this. Don't let the realistic eclipse the real. And I often say that to my students at Yale, because I want them to understand when, you know, sometimes people get very excited about, I have to, set a scene and it has to be like all these things, it has to be all this stuff in the scene. And I think, well, I teach Shakespeare. So if you're going to do Shakespeare that way, it's going to be, I mean, I'm sure there'll be someone that could prove me wrong in all this, but it doesn't float. It doesn't live as much. It's meant to be, it's meant to be a gesture. It's meant to be, to live in the words and in the fluidity of its action.
Hi, this is Andrew, and I'm interrupting what I know is an enthralling interview because I want you all to know that we are sponsored by Broadview Press. And if you don't know, Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher who publishes books covering topics like English studies, writing, philosophy, history, gender studies. And every season on the podcast, I interview one of the Broadview Press authors. So for the fall, we had Anne Stevens on to talk about literary theory and criticism. She played a Wizard of Oz literary game with us. She talked about why Bridgerton actually involves literary theory. So does 50 Shades of Grey. Who knew? And also, we just had on Jeffrey Weinstock, who wrote the first ever pop culture analysis book. So, I am all things a lover of pop culture, especially my Hollywood topics, Real Housewives, the list goes on and on. And he also wrote the book called The Mad Scientist's Guide to Composition, where he's writing a book teaching students about how to write rhetorical strategies, but it's all around this metaphor of being in the mad scientist laboratory, because as you'll learn when you hear our episode with Jeffrey, he is a gothic and horror fanatic. And I mean that in all the best ways possible. So you don't want to miss Broadview Press's exclusive discount. Because you're listening to the podcast, all of you get an automatic 20% off. Use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off site-wide on all of their books. So in our show notes, we have a link to Broadview Press. Make sure you click the link, put in Ivory Tower, and you're going to get 20% off your order. So enjoy your reading, everyone.
And so the real, that is with us, the real is like a Rothko painting, that you get drawn in and you see more and more and more, and it gets almost trippy, but it's not, and it's not realistic, and that was very important for me. And And so, in the tutelage of also reading Peter Brook, who is also a great mentor, I mean, I've met him a few times, and he also is gone last year, but um he his and he's a mentor to so many of us in that are alive now, directing, because an extraordinary mind, and who wrote down The Empty Space, that amazing piece of writing about theater, holy theater. And I took it to heart. I mean, I read that and I said, wow, and then had Leavey as my mentor, um and we, and working together, um and seeing sometimes how he would say, you would do that differently, wouldn't you? And I said, yeah, I probably would. Just trusting, for instance, um I it's funny, just certain moments where he did something and I would have probably taken it. I don't know. Yeah, but I didn't. I was interested in what he was doing. I was following that, and I was there to help him. That's what I wanted to do, to be of assistance in any way I could.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Shakespeare. So I think it's really important because just even the way, and I'm sure the audience who's listening, this is resonating so much that when you hear Shakespeare or classic theater, ancient Greek drama, there it's almost this misconception, or it's something maybe I've wanted to be upfront with my students, and I have a feeling you're in this similar camp, which is getting it out of this stuffy, very um, jilted way of seeing it as only for the elite academics. And Shakespeare, the way you're describing though, this organic sense of coming from the language and the words and surprising yourself as that character in the moment is really inspiring. And I know you had The Merchant in Venice, in the Jewish ghetto was actually where it was performed. So, how did that all come to be? I mean, and it wasn't just The Merchant of Venice, but you've done Romeo and Juliet and I mean many Shakespeare productions.
Yeah.
So, if we use Shakespeare, because I can tell um it's a collection and his work is really resonating with your method, and I think is a good case study for us to get into. Okay, this is how she really processes her directing vision. So yeah, what was that, just being in a Jewish ghetto and that sensory experience, how did that feel for you as a director?
Well, it was extraordinary, and everybody involved in the project we were just beside ourselves. So what happened is I was approached by David Castan, who is a Shakespearean at Yale. He was at Columbia first, actually, and a very dear friend. And then also Shalbasi of Ca' Foscari, which is the university in Venice. And they kind of cooked up this idea of doing The Merchant of Venice as a kind of provocation in the Jewish ghetto to mark the 500th anniversary of its founding, in conjunction with the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. So there were a lot of people, coming around this project, and that was in 2016. So it was thrilling. When I first got this email from David, I was in Hawaii with family, and I said, "Wow, yes, I'm interested, but I'm going to, I'm just rereading the play." I was a little scared because my family is Jewish. Am not born Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I call myself Judeo-Christian. So, um, but I knew I was very excited, and reread it, thought, and said, yes, 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 I will do this. Our company had been in Italy, um, and we started all these conversations. We had been in Orvieto for about 3, 4, 3 years doing the medieval mystery plays. Then later on, we did Orfeo, an opera, Monteverdi.
Oh, and what is your company?
Oh,
So,
it's Compagnia de Colombari. So we were born in Orvieto. We were born in Italy. So some of the squadra, some of them are Italian and some of them are American, and many Americans, and then many of them have worked together, know each other, and and trying to keep all of that afloat with limited funding has been a challenge, but we'll see. We'll see. Don't give up. But anyway, with the Merchant of Venice project, this was looked at by, this was kind of hovered over by many people, many angels who gave to the project. And we had a workshop in 2015 that we worked on Isola San Giorgio in the Cini Fondazione Cini, which was also amazing because that's kind of a repository of theater research, and Shaul, who is kind of the unofficial mayor of the ghetto. I mean, he's Jewish and a professor of Shakespeare at Ca' Foscari, so he was boots on the ground and just worked like crazy, for this to happen.
well, and there's so much um pressure, especially with the Merchant of Venice and
Yeah.
how there's anti-Semitic conversations around it, not weighing in and judging it one way or another. Because I think it really comes from, it sounds, as a community, how you all came together and had these conversations. I'm assuming of how to do it in a way that honors the Jewish community and also creates conversations, especially to mark the anniversary of the Jewish ghetto. You said 500 years, Shakespeare's 400th anniversary. Um, that did it draw a lot of the public? Because it sounds like something I'm consistently hearing that I love is how public all of your concerns are, is how is this going to reach an audience outside of the quote unquote status quo, like those who will always come to these theatrical experiences, but how can we um bring in a new audience and rethink it a little?
I love that. I think that's very much the journey I'm on with this particular play. One thing that I did that's really central to the whole project is that rather than inviting one gentleman, to play the role of Shylock, which we all know, and we've seen some beautiful performances by people that we could all name immediately. But I wanted to open it up to the 5 scenes of Shylock, to have these scenes played by one different Shylock in each scene, so that it would be um, something that was Jewish and universal. And so I had 5 different, very different characters, and we did it in North America too, in with an American company at Montclair, and at up at Yale and up in Dartmouth, and yeah, it was super fun. But in with these 5 Shylocks, they came together twice, and so one is the merchant, one is the father, one is the sort I call the mother, but because it's a single parent, Leah, clearly he loved Leah in that one line that he says, "I had it of her when I was a bachelor," that ring that Jessica took. Um so the the widower, the mother, the father, the mother, the widower, and the killer. And so much. I mean, the study of the text is incredible. I think that this text, and I beg to differ with my another mentor of mine, a kind of surrogate father, who also is not with us anymore, Harold Bloom, who said he thought that this play should not be on the shelf, and I respectfully disagree. I think that the writer is framing this Judaism, anti-Semitism, this I think he's framing it and showing what the culture does. Now, I know that many things, and this play could be taken as an example, you know, as we know, it's been played so that it can show Shylock as a villain, or as and then since the Holocaust, since World War II, then it's also been seen sometimes overly sentimental, thinking that he's this great hero. He's not a great hero. He's not also this villain. He's a human being. Shylock is, another favorite writer of mine, Ken Gross, wrote a beautiful Shylock is Shakespeare. I mean, there's a sense of of Shakespeare ex, ex, uh, expressing his own humanity, and Shylock is the only one in the play that calls upon an invisible community, the community that is not with us anymore, but that is there. So on Abraham, on Jacob, on um, Isaac, and and Daniel, and when you go deep into the text, and this is where I could get super excited, and because there's never an end. You never get to an end. You could keep doing it, and the thing is that the root goes deep, 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 and the cries go very high, and a center point of the whole where the play really shifted in the ghetto is just it's the lights, because we started it at twilight, and so it was still daylight, and this is summertime, of course, um, but at the point of Jessica leaving, she took a torch, and it was like she was going into carnival. And it's also really weird that Lorenzo asked her to hold the torch. That is not the part that you give to your beloved. That is a very dangerous place to be, in the front of the group of men, in the labyrinthine passageways of Venice, which could be very dangerous and dark. Um, so she, at that point, Frank London, who's the founder of the Klezmatics, played the sort of song of Shylock on this trumpet up on a roof of in the ghetto, and um, we started with this kind of attack on the five actors playing Shylock. They each played other roles as well, but each of them then was changed by the crew, the Black Angels, I call them, into the Shylock robe, which they each had a kind of desert robe with a golden sash that, instead of marking with a star or an armband, was actually right around their whole center, their corpus, their core. And it was a beautiful silk. Stefano Nicolao made the costumes, and we talked through everything. This was so gorgeous, and they were all transformed with these desert cloths, and then they came together. And Shylock number 3, played by Jenny Jones, who's actually from Wales, um, and she let out a howl um, after the whole company. I gave them the text from Salerno and Salarino and put it on the world stage, putting it in French and German and Italian and English and Spanish and all languages, making fun of the Jew, that their sort of mockeries of him, um, and put it in the language of the entire company of the actors, they were first and foremost a company, and then they played the roles. And these 5 Shylocks came together and created a kind of they created a group almost like Rodin's The Burghers of Calais. I realized that was an image after we, you know, it's just things are always coinciding constantly, and that's always a sign that like the 5 Shylocks is also like the 5 books of the Torah, and the 500 years, and the 5 windows representing the 5 books, and the 5, because our set, we did not create a set. We just played right on the stones of Venice, and we created stadium seating for the audience, 250 people, to watch in front of the 2 synagogues in the Jewish ghetto, the stunning German synagogue with its 5 windows, and then the Italian synagogue. So those, and these apartment buildings that of the ghetto that go back all these years. They couldn't build out, so they built up, so it's like, it's a story. So this howl that Jenny Jones let out came from the very stones, came. She's a force. She's a force, and I just saw her in Venice. We're working again on another project, but she she let out a howl and fearless, and it went up, up, up into the sky, so that it again, almost like that moment at Epidatus that I had, where you could hear anything that happened. It was so silent in the ghetto. People came out on their balconies to watch. We had so much police there because people were very scared. The Jewish Museum of New York was going to come, and then they did not come because of all the stuff that was going on. You know, the French Bastille. You know, there was the terrorist attacks were going on all over the place, and so people were scared. Ruth Bader Ginsburg came to see it, our production, because you know, she was invited, and also her grandson is part of our company. But it was just extraordinary, and so we had lots of security, lots of police. Everyone was quiet as Jenny let out this howl from ancient howl of this, um, you know, nonstop, incessant, you know, inability to see the beauty of the other, you know, and
Well,
yeah,
and I think that inability um to not see the other, or you're kind of, it's so interesting because more or less I am is has that theme, which I also want everyone to note out there, that yes, well, you founded two theater companies, but you also do write, like for More or Less I Am, you actually put together the writing of how Whitman's the dialogue would sound, and you were involved with all of that as well, correct?
yeah. It's an adaptation that I worked with a few marvelous people. John Halpern, who, oh, I'm mentioning all these people who are not with us anymore. It breaks my heart, but he um, was a writer for the New York Observer, and we worked together on putting starting this project of More or Less I Am, and going through Song of Myself. 1855 edition was really important to me. I didn't want to do the other editions. I wanted to do the primal impulse, the primal sort of thing um, that Whitman came up with, you know, when he was 36 years old in 1855. I just feel so uh, important and real, and urgent somehow. And also, he was wanting to make something huge. You know, what was it going to be? A musical? What was it going to be? A book? What was it going to be? No, it became a poem, but it's kind of a poem of these United States, or even these continents, these Americas. So we sat for many meetings, you know, and went through and said, let's have this. No, let's not have that. Let's have this. Let's not have that, because we knew that we didn't want to do the whole thing. What I'm not, you know, the theater, like I always go back to the god is of the theater is Dionysus, and it's not about being, um, you know, dutiful or reverent. It's not about that. It's about shaking things up, and it's about saying, I'm going to steal this, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to do this. But I wanted Whitman's words, because Whitman is the guy we're dancing with. It's Whitman, um, you know, who's just prophetic in what he wrote.
And in Song of Myself, it's Whitman who writes Phallic Processions, which is actually all related to the Dionysian festivals. So, that Dionysus makes an appearance through Whitman's own imaginary, his imagination, his poetics, and it seems like we keep circling back to like where the root of theater is, but how it's made anew. Like
Yeah,
there's always new reverberations, and right, being aware of that,
yeah,
um, and paying homage. But I love what you say, that you can't be dutiful. Like
yeah,
you can't pay reverence and think, okay, I have to do an adaptation of all of Song of Myself, or
No.
even if it's an adaptation of a classic novel,
Yeah.
there's always going to be a different interpretation, and I think that's what's so exciting about Shakespeare too, is where is it set? Oh, is it, in Manhattan in 2023?
Yeah.
You in a, Greenwich Village, art gallery, or we that's what's so inviting about the theater.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, always getting the collaborators that you also want to work with very much. And that with the more or less I am, the musicians are just extraordinary and did so much research, but they bring their stuff. They're so vital. We're all, I mean, it's important to be vital in the work and to see the vitality of the writer that you're working with. So it's Shakespeare is alive now as he was then, as is Whitman. I mean, they say things, but you can't hold them to say whatever they said or didn't say. Who cares? You know what? It's what they wrote in their prophetic moments that where that they're touched in the head. We artists are touched in the head.
Hey, Ivory Tower Boiler Room listeners and true crime friends. You've heard me gush over this incredible woman and her beautiful products. I'm talking about Mandy Made It. Mandy makes customized and original crochet and pre-cut goods. They are the perfect, unique, one-of-a-kind gift for literally anyone in your life. And she makes incredible home decor. I still have my pumpkins that I put out every fall. I just love them. Check her out on Instagram at MANDEE Made It, or search Mandy Made It on Facebook. To order, just slide into her DMs, and if you mention the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, you will receive a free personalized gift with your first order. So, go on Instagram and look up at Mandy Made It, and Mandy is spelled MANDEE. Again, her handle is at Mandy Made It, Mandy spelled MANDEE, and order today.
Hi, this is Andrew. So, when I'm not here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, sometimes I'm actually invited to be on other podcasts as a guest. Well, there is one podcast run by Christian Garcia and his co-host Nate that I absolutely love. It is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. So calling all you classic cinema fans out there and those who love queer theme cinema, which I think there's a lot of you who are listening right now where you've perked up. So follow them on Instagram at that OL Gay Classic Cinema. The first ever episode I was featured as a guest. It's The Sound of Music. I got to talk about being Captain Von Trapp in high school, and it's just such an exciting conversation. They've also featured discussions about Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, which features guests from the podcast The Garland Gab and Down the Yellow Brick Pod. There's a deep dive of Cinderella, and recently they had an episode on the film Giants starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean. And actually, one of the guests, Lauren Randall, I know from Stony Brook University's PhD English department. So shout out, Lauren. You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's definitely such a great listen. So why not listen to it after you listen to this current episode on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room?
You're just like, I don't know. It's happening, and I'm listening to what the thing wants to be, what the piece that we're making. We're making something, we're sculpting something, and what does it want to be? And so you listen hard to it, and you give, and with the collaborators, and as the director, I'm the visionary of it, but I listen super hard to it and all of us, and we're all listening, and it comes into being. and then we know, and then it can change too. Like more or less, I am. Sometimes we shift, we change, we add something, you know, uh, all kinds of things happen. So, yeah.
Well, and it's just these investment in the multifacetedness of how, whether it be Shakespeare or Whitman, um, that these creators and yourself, I mean, you're so inspiring, Karin, because you're really recognizing these, that you're taking risks of presenting the contradictions of whether it's poetry or the dramatic text that you choose, that it spurs a conversation and it can cause controversy. But isn't that what we're lacking right now, is the need for dialogue, that we need to have these debates and discussions and not hide it behind a mask.
Right.
Like that's where maybe the mask isn't going to work in this ancient Greek metaphor. We
Yeah.
need to put it all out there. So, how do you think about that? Especially, you're giving me so much encouragement as a mentor in my own life of even, here we are recording at Pen and Brush. Here you are on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcast, but I also have an affiliation with Stony Brook University. You do with Yale School of Drama, but we have these passion organizations. I mean, you have a theatrical company. Do you ever feel, does that voice in your head that we have that cautions you ever come in and you have to put it in check and say, no, I'm going for this artistic vision. I'm not going to listen to institutional, bureaucratic advice of just playing it safe.
Oh yeah, I never play it safe. Never. I mean, what it's that's not what we're called to do. It's just not. I don't get that. And I tell my students, there's certain things that dictate, when we don't have enough money. And money does dictate things. Um, the lack of, but it can also create opportunities that you would not have known about. But I that's not to say, okay, poor theater forever, but because we pay actors. I mean, we are always trying to find the funding and all of that, so that's a boring conversation. But you know um no, I say to my students, don't be polite. That, you know, be polite off stage, but don't be polite on stage. Because if you're being polite on stage, you go to when I go to the theater and my head, which is exploding with stuff, and all kinds of tempests and all kinds of stuff. And on stage, it's much more controlled than in my head. I think, well, what the heck am I here for? I'm not getting anything from this. This is very, it's nicely done. It's fine. But it's not taking me anyplace. It's not gripping me. It's not taking me anyplace. So I wanted to go to a place that a person on stage and the creators on stage have had the as Lorca says, the duende, you that's the that's a holy thing too. That's a whole other thing, you know, but it's like the fearlessness to be able to go to a place that you don't know, you know, and to trust that somehow in that not knowing, it will come up. It will be made known. And so you have to trust. I was just saying a group of students at school the other day, are starting Julius Caesar. And I said to them, trust yourselves, trust each other, and trust what is greater than all of us put together. When that is deeply invested and when all of that happens and you trust on those three levels, then amazing things happen.
Well, I think you've led us into where I'm now going to turn it over to our subscribers. So, everyone out there, I'm still with Karin. I'm not moving from this, but I want to get into, just for a few more minutes, this really important conversation about the risk taking, what you say to your students, but also it has come up on the podcast before with off-Broadway musical creator Jeffrey Schmelkin about the vibrancy I see with off-Broadway, or even when I've gone to the Red Bull Theater with Shakespeare productions, or even The Flea. I just saw one of my former students was in Twelfth Night, and it was so beautifully done. But why are we thinking about the corporatization of theater in a completely distorted way? Like, are we prioritizing certain um, productions in a way where we're valorizing, like just highlighting Broadway, which I know both of us love, but are we not looking at other arenas? Like, what are we missing out on if we only focus on Broadway and that capitalist model? So, everyone out there, I'm gonna let Karin dwell on this, but go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. We're gonna get into this. And also I want to hear about some misconceptions about the Yale School of Drama, because I feel it's lurking in our background. And, if Meryl Streep ever listens to this, I want her to be proud. Okay, so we are going to come right back. Welcome to the spring season. This is Andrew from the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Make sure that you always listen to our new episodes on Mondays. Are you following us on social media? No? Oh, you need to. Follow the Ivory Tower Boiler Room on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and on Twitter at Ivory Boiler Room.
Hey, true crime friends. This is Mary DePippi, host of True Crime in Academia. Don't forget, episodes come out on Fridays at 7:30 p.m. And you can also follow True Crime in Academia on social media. On Instagram and TikTok, we're at True Crime in Academia. And on Twitter, at TC in Academia.
And Mary and I, we need some coffee. We need to keep a pep in our step, and we just need that caffeine. So
we sound energetic. We're not. We're tired.
Yeah, no, this is all coffee. So the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe is our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. $5 a month unlocks so many bonus episodes. So for the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, you get Mary and I, our exclusive winter arts and culture hot takes, including what do we think about Prince Harry, Pamela Anderson? Were our Oscars predictions right? Why does James Cameron have to make Avatar movies? We want more Titanic. Okay, and also I dissect straight gym bro culture with Dominic Janes. Why are people afraid of sodomy? You get all the uncensored conversations on Patreon. That's where our bonus episodes are. And I know, Mary, what do you have on Patreon?
Oh, we have a lot right now. I cover cases that I would not cover on the podcast. So if you want to access those, like Andrew said, go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So you can see episodes from True Crime, like The Dating Game Killer, AKA Rodney Alcala. Or you can see the live video interviews that we have done. Most recently, I interviewed not one, but 2 forensic psychologists. And get this, I only released 30 minutes of the actual audio to the podcast. So that means the whole extra 30 minutes is on Patreon just for subscribers.
Wait, an extra 30 minutes?
Extra 30 minutes.
A cup of coffee, everyone. Okay, well, I also want to shout out our amazing internship team here. So our interns include Andrea, Sarah, Caitlin, Rosie, and Sheila. A round of applause to all of them. We thank you. They keep the Ivory Tower Boiler Room literally going. So Mary and I are so appreciative. Thanks to our audience. And we can't wait to see you back here. Bye, everyone.